sometime in the Middle Ages, we don't know exactly when, the monks of Monte Cassino made a purchase.
What kind of purchase?
A towel.
A towel?
Not just any towel, the towel, the cloth Jesus Christ himself used to wash his disciples' feet at the Last Supper.
Okay, hold on. How did they know it was authentic?
Here's the thing. The merchant demonstrated, threw it into a fire, pulled it out, unburned.
Ah.
If it doesn't burn, it must be holy, proof of divine origin.
Except it wasn't holy.
It was asbestos, a mineral. The monks paid a fortune for a rock.
That's the cleanest grift I've ever heard. No moving parts, just geology and faith.
And it wasn't a one-time scam. Medieval merchants sold asbestos as fragments of the true cross, pieces of saints' burial shrouds, holy relics that could survive fire because God himself had blessed them.
When really
It was serpentine rock from Cyprus. But here's the thing. The medieval con artists didn't invent this game.
they inherited it.
They inherited it. The Romans, the Greeks, go back far enough, probably the Cypriots. 4,000 years of people looking at this impossible material, cloth that doesn't burn, and seeing opportunity.
Follow the money.
Always.
Asbestos, a conspiracy 4,500 years in the making, is sponsored by Danziger and Dayano, Dandel.com.
We're going to get to the medieval fraudsters, the fake relics, Charlemagne winning bar bets with his tablecloth, a forged letter from a fictional king that launched 1,000 scams. That's all coming.
But not today.
Not today. Today we go back, because before the con artists, there were true believers. Before the scams, there was genuine mystery. And underneath all of it, the monks, the merchants, the emperors throwing napkins into fire to impress foreign dignitaries.
Money.
Always money.
How much are we talking?
You know Cleopatra's pearls?
The one she dissolved in vinegar to win a bet?
Those. The pair was supposedly worth 60 million sesterces, though ancient sources love inflating these numbers.
So, what's that in real money?
Depends who you ask. Somewhere between $30 million and $300 million. Ancient currency conversions are a nightmare.
So, a lot.
A lot. Pliny says she bet Mark Antony she could spend 10 million sesterces on a single meal.
And won by dissolving a pearl worth 3 times the bet.
That's the story. Whether the numbers are real or just got bigger with each retelling.
Like fish stories.
Like fish stories. But even if Pliny exaggerated by a factor of 10, we're still talking about someone destroying tens of millions of dollars in jewelry just to win a bar bet.
That's Elon Musk energy. Watch me destroy something priceless to prove a point nobody asked me to prove.
Except she did it at dinner, with vinegar.
Faster than buying Twitter, I'll give her that.
So, to put that in perspective, a Roman legionary earned 900 to 1,200 sesterces a year. That's a soldier. Professional military, decent job by ancient standards.
Okay.
Pliny the Elder says asbestos cloth equals the prices of exceptional pearls.
So we're talking
Millions.
for a napkin that doesn't burn. How is that even possible?
2 tiny places on a map, a geological accident, and a labor chain that nobody wanted to think about too carefully.
Right. Who benefits from not thinking about it?
Everyone selling, everyone buying, everyone except the workers.
2 places.
2 places. Maybe 3 if you count India, but Pliny's descriptions of Indian asbestos are confused. We'll get to that. The actual sources, Charistus and Cyprus.
Where's Charistus?
Greek island, Euboea, long strip of land off the eastern coast of mainland Greece. Charistus sits at the southern tip, tucked under Mount Ochi.
What's special about it?
Same thing that makes Cyprus special. And this is where it gets interesting. Both locations are what geologists call ophiolite complexes.
A what now?
Oceanic crust, ancient seafloor that got shoved up onto land instead of diving back into the mantle, 92 million years ago in Cyprus's case. These formations produce a very specific rock type through a process called serpentinization,
Which creates asbestos.
which can create asbestos. Important distinction. The serpentine rock is common, but the conditions that produce actual fibrous asbestos veins, temperature below 350 degrees Celsius, significant water infiltration. The U.S. Geological Survey puts it this way. Conditions had to be sufficiently long and perturbation-free to allow continuous growth of silicate chains into fibrous structures.
That sounds rare.
Extremely. Commercial asbestos deposits, only 5 to 6% fiber by volume. Thin veins a few centimeters thick, unpredictable.
So even in the right places,
You still had to find the actual veins. Ancient prospectors had no way to predict where they'd occur. You'd find a surface exposure, extract what you could, and then that was it. Dig down and you hit solid rock.
so whoever controlled those two places,
Controlled the supply. Now you'd think Charistus would be all about asbestos given the prices, but here's what actually happened. Mount Ochi has 140 ancient quarries documented by Greek archaeologist Papageorgicus.
140?
And most of them weren't for asbestos, they were for Cipollino marble.
The green marble?
Famous throughout the Roman world. Those green columns in Roman forums? Charistus. Same geological formation that produces the beautiful green marble also produces asbestos fiber.
2 luxury goods, 1 geological accident.
And they traveled together, same trade routes. The quarries sat about 5 kilometers inland, extracted material went down to the port of Marmari, then across the Aegean, up the Tyrrhenian Sea to Ostia, Rome's massive artificial harbor.
Okay, so
And this is where economics gets interesting. The cost ratio for ancient transport, sea to river to land, 1 to 5 to 28.
meaning
Meaning it cost the same to ship something 2,000 kilometers by sea as 80 kilometers overland.
wait, 2,000 by sea equals 80 over land?
The Mediterranean was a highway, land was a nightmare.
So asbestos from coastal sources.
Made economic sense. Cyprus to Rome via roads, 2 or 3 weeks under favorable conditions. But asbestos from inland deposits, the transport costs would have eaten any profit.
That's convenient if you're the one controlling the coastal sources.
Which brings us to 17 CE. Augustus declares the Charistus quarries imperial property, Patrimonium Caesaris. The emperor now controls the marble and the asbestos.
Of course he did.
Though Cyprus had multiple options, Pausanias names Carpasian fiber for Athena's lamp, Dioscorides describes what he calls Aminatos lithos, the undefiled stone, from Cyprus, the Troodos Mountains, the village of Amiantos.
Amiantos.
The locals called the stuff Bambaco Petra, cotton stone. And here's the thing, that name predates modern mining. The site wasn't commercially exploited until 1904, but the locals knew. They'd always known.
They just couldn't get to enough of it.
Nobody could, not with ancient technology.
Let's go back to the money. You said Pliny compared asbestos to exceptional pearls.
You did. And to understand what that means, you need to understand Roman luxury economics. So picture this.
Hit me with numbers.
To qualify for the Roman Senate, you needed property worth 1 million sesterces. That made you elite. Julius Caesar once gave a pearl to his mistress Servilia, 6 million sesterces.
6 times the Senate threshold.
For a single pearl, for a gift. Here's another one. The actor Aesopus had a son who wanted to know what extreme wealth tasted like. So he dissolved a pearl worth 1 million sesterces in a cup of wine and drank it,
Just to taste it?
just to taste it.
And what did wealth taste like?
History does not record his tasting notes.
I assume something like bold, assertive, an immediate hit of poor judgment, followed by secondary notes of dissolved calcium and regret. The finish is 900 years of legionary wages swallowed in a single gulp, decant directly into your ego.
I'm citing that.
Please don't.
And then there's Lollia Paulina.
Incredible name. That has get ready with me TikTok energy. Please tell me she had a skincare line.
Roman aristocrat, wife of Emperor Caligula for about 4 months. So, yes, basically.
4 months married to Caligula. I've seen that film. Well, parts of it.
Different Caligula.
It's similar production values, I imagine.
She owned a collection of pearls and emeralds worth 40 million sesterces.
So yes, on the skincare line.
40 times the Senate threshold. And here's the detail that kills me. Pliny says she wore this collection to an ordinary dinner party.
Not a state occasion.
Not a celebration, just dinner. And she brought the receipts
The receipts.
to prove she really owned them, to prove the value.
That's the world Pliny is describing when he says asbestos cloth equals the prices of exceptional pearls.
So an asbestos shroud?
Could represent centuries of ordinary wages. This wasn't commercial. This wasn't an industry producing goods for market.
This was 1%er of the 1% territory.
How many pieces are we even talking about?
Handful per decade, maybe? Royal cremation shrouds to keep ashes separate from the pyre, temple offerings like Athena's eternal lamp, elite party tricks where you throw a napkin in fire to impress your guests. Dioscorides mentions theater napkins sold to wealthy patrons.
Wait, theater napkins?
We don't know exactly what that means. Souvenirs, status symbols, fire demonstrations between acts?
Buy your commemorative fireproof napkin in the lobby.
Something like that. The point is, a handful of objects owned by people whose wealth was otherwise incomprehensible.
The workers.
Two groups: miners who extracted the fiber, spinners who turned it into thread.
What do we actually know about them?
Less than you'd expect, given how valuable the product was.
Right. Ancient writers love describing luxury goods.
They did not love describing how those goods were produced.
Convenient.
But we can infer. Mining in the ancient world was brutal. Slaves, condemned criminals. There's a Roman legal term, damnatio ad metalla, sentenced to the mines until death.
Until death.
War prisoners, debt-enslaved persons. Diodorus Siculus describes Egyptian gold mines, men in chains, working in darkness, dying where they fell.
And that was standard.
Those conditions were general to ancient mining, not specific to asbestos.
Okay, but what about health effects?
We covered this last episode. The short version, every passage people cite as proof the ancients knew, Pliny's masks, Strabo's 6 slaves,
Wrong workers. Wrong minds.
mercury and arsenic, not asbestos. So we're left with a question.
Did anyone notice?
And the answer is, they couldn't have. Think about the math. How many people are we talking about working asbestos across the entire ancient Mediterranean?
You said a few dozen.
At most, scattered across 3 or 4 sites, thousands of miles apart. No central workplace, no registry, no one comparing notes.
And the latency period.
Makes it invisible. 20 to 50 years between inhaling the fiber and developing disease. Average life expectancy in Rome?
I'm guessing not 50.
22 to 35, if you made it past childhood. An asbestos worker could inhale dust every day for a decade, and Pliny would be dead before that worker got sick.
So the pattern that kills 3,000 Americans a year now
Was statistically undetectable then. Not because they didn't care, because the sample size was too small and the timeline was too long.
That's almost worse, isn't it? They suffered and the math made it invisible.
The math, and the mortality, and the geography, everything conspired to hide it.
Okay, but we've only talked about the people digging it out of the ground.
Right. Someone still has to turn raw fiber into cloth.
The spinners.
Women. Almost exclusively.
How do we know that?
Grave markers. There's a Latin word for spinner, quasilaria. When it shows up on Roman epitaphs, it's on women's graves. That was women's work.
So the miners are enslaved men dying in quarries, and the spinners
Are women, probably enslaved too, or household workers, breathing the same fibers just indoors instead of underground.
Do we have any idea how long this took, spinning asbestos into cloth?
Not for asbestos specifically, but experimental archaeology gives us numbers for wool. Spinning 1 Roman pound of wool, about 300 grams, took roughly 180 hours.
180 hours for less than a pound.
A complete toga? 40 kilometers of thread. 900 hours of spinning, 4 to 6 months of full-time work for a single garment.
And asbestos would be harder.
Almost certainly. The fibers don't bind naturally, no lanolin like wool, no moisture. Strabo says it was combed out and woven, same as flax, but more brittle, more labor, more exposure.
So behind every napkin some emperor threw into a fire,
Months of someone's life, probably a woman's, breathing dust that wouldn't kill her for decades, if she lived that long.
and Lolia Paulina gets to bring receipts to dinner parties.
The Roman influencer economy.
Love my new pearls. Link in bio. Like and follow. The prices only make sense if people believe this stuff was magic.
And they did. Even the experts.
What do you mean, even the experts?
Pliny the Elder, our most important ancient source on asbestos, believed it was a plant.
No.
Live linen growing in the deserts of India, scorched by the burning rays of the sun, where no rain falls, amid terrible serpents.
He thought it grew, like flax.
He called it linum vivum, living linen. And think about what that description does.
Indian origins?
Impossible to verify. Nobody's sailing to the deserts of India to check.
Desert rarity?
Justifies astronomical prices. Of course it's expensive. It grows in impossible conditions.
Fire scorched?
Suggests supernatural properties. The sun itself tempered this plant.
Meanwhile, the actual sources?
Asbestos and Cyprus. Mediterranean islands. Nothing like Indian deserts.
So who benefits from Pliny being wrong?
Everyone selling the mystery was the point.
Mystery means whatever the market will bear.
And Pliny himself witnessed the demonstrations. Fire-cleaned napkins at banquets.
The party trick.
Host throws asbestos napkin into blazing fire, guests gasp, napkin emerges whiter and cleaner than before. Status display. Proof you have access to impossible materials.
Same trick the medieval merchants used.
Same trick. 1,300 years later, they're selling Jesus' towel to monks using the exact same demonstration. Fire proves the miraculous.
When really, fire just proves geology.
But geology doesn't sell.
Too grounded.
Was that?
Moving on. Here's what I don't understand. If asbestos was worth as much as exceptional pearls, why didn't people find more of it?
They tried.
What stopped them?
Physics, chemistry, the limits of ancient technology.
Walk me through it.
Chrysotile asbestos, the type most commonly used in antiquity, forms through serpentinization, specific hydrothermal conditions, very specific rock formations, ophiolites,
The oceanic crust thrust onto land.
which is itself rare. Most oceanic crust stays at the seafloor or gets subducted into the mantle. Surface exposures are uncommon, typically in mountainous terrain, hard to access.
And even when you find an ophiolite,
The serpentine rock is common. The fibrous asbestos veins within it are not. 5 to 6% of commercial deposits by volume. Thin veins, a few centimeters thick, unpredictable location.
So you'd find a surface exposure.
Extract what you could, and then hit a wall. Literally, serpentine rock. Hardness 3 to 6 on the Mohs scale. Ancient tools, iron picks, wedges, chisels, fire setting to crack rock, good enough for surface deposits.
Useless for systematic deep extraction.
They couldn't follow the veins underground. They couldn't even predict where the veins would go. No core drilling, no geological surveys. No way to know if that thin surface vein extended 20 feet or 2 inches.
So what changed?
Industrial technology, explosives, mechanized processing, steam-powered transport. The Jeffrey Mine in Quebec opened in 1879. Single mine.
Go on.
450 million tons of ore reserves.
450 million.
More asbestos than the ancient world consumed in 4,000 years. From one mine.
So the scarcity wasn't artificial.
The scarcity was real. Peak global production hit 4.8 million tons annually in 1977. The ancient world extracted kilograms, maybe small tons across centuries.
That's what made the prices possible.
That's what enabled the mystery. That's what let medieval merchants sell rocks to monks as holy relics.
Because nobody could prove otherwise.
Because the truth was buried in mountains they couldn't excavate.
So 2 places on Earth.
Maybe 3 if you count India, but we have no evidence of actual extraction there.
Brutal mining conditions.
Same as any ancient mining operation.
Women spinning the fiber
That's who did textile work.
to produce napkins for banquets
That the super rich threw into fire to impress their friends.
and shrouds for dead kings,
To keep their ashes pure.
while Pliny thought it was a desert plant guarded by serpents.
And nobody corrected him, because mystery pays better than geology.
And at some point, Plutarch says the Charistos veins were almost extinct.
Exhausted. A few centuries of exploitation and the accessible surface deposits were gone.
But the mystery remained.
The mystery grew, because now it was even rarer. Now the merchants could claim almost anything. Indian deserts, salamander fur, holy relics from the Last Supper.
Same trick.
Different era, same trick.
Next time, what the ancients left behind. Finished pottery shards with asbestos temper. The absence of mesothelioma in ancient remains. Why the archaeological evidence tells a different story than the written sources. And the Amianta site in Cyprus, where the modern mining era began over ancient footprints.
Episode 6.
Episode 6. You know, we just spent this whole episode talking about invisible workers, people whose suffering didn't make it into the historical record.
Because the math hit it. Too few workers, too scattered, too long between exposure and disease.
That's not true anymore.
No, it's not. 3,000 Americans diagnosed every year. The pattern is visible now, and so is the paper trail.
And the ancient merchants didn't keep receipts for the labor, but the modern asbestos companies, they kept everything.
Internal memos, medical studies they buried, meeting minutes where executives discussed what they knew and when they knew it.
And that's exactly what Danziger and Dayano has been tracking down for over 30 years.
If you or someone you love has been diagnosed with mesothelioma, you're not invisible. The exposure happened somewhere, a shipyard, a refinery, a construction site, a power plant, and Paul Danziger and Rod Dayano know how to trace it back.
Paul's been doing asbestos litigation his entire career, over 30 years building cases against the companies that hid what they knew.
And Rod Dayano has spent decades fighting for families who thought they were out of options.
Nearly $2 billion recovered for asbestos victims isn't just a number. It's families who stopped being invisible.
If you want to understand your options, the consultation is free.
Dandel.com.
That is DANDELL.com.